As the clock struck midnight, Jennifer sat curled up on her couch binge, watching her favorite show. The rain pattered against the window, creating a cozy atmosphere that only intensified her craving for comfort food. With a few taps on her phone, she placed an order from her favorite local pizza place, knowing it was a bit of a gamble to order so late at night. 10 minutes later, her phone buzzed with a notification. Order confirmed. Delivery in 30 minutes. A sense of anticipation washed over her as she settled deeper into the couch, the smell of the rain mixing with the warmth of her living room. As the minutes ticked by, Jennifer became lost in the twists and turns of her show. The sound of thunder rumbled outside, shaking her from her trance. She glanced at the clock. It had been 45 minutes since she placed her order. A frown crossed her face. This wasn't like them. Just then, her phone buzzed again, this time with a message from the delivery driver. "I'm outside." A shiver ran down her spine. She hadn't heard a knock or the doorbell. Perhaps he was waiting for her to come out. She stood up, a little unsteady from being on the couch for so long, and made her way to the door. As she opened it, her breath caught in her throat. Standing there was a man dressed in a dark jacket, his face obscured by shadows. "Jennifer?" he asked, his voice low and gravelly. "Yeah, that's me," she replied, forcing a smile, even though something about him felt off. He handed her a pizza box, his eyes darting around as if he were afraid of being seen. "Enjoy your meal," he said, turning away too quickly for comfort. "Wait, can I pay you?" She called out, confusion creeping in, but he didn't respond. He just walked away, disappearing into the darkness of the rainy night. Shrugging off the odd interaction, Jennifer closed the door and turned her attention to the pizza. She placed the box on the coffee table and opened it, the delicious aroma filling the room. But as she took a slice, she noticed something strange. There was a small note tucked underneath the pizza. Curious, she pulled it out and unfolded it. The message was simple yet chilling. "I know what you did." Her heart raced as panic gripped her. What did he mean? She didn't remember doing anything wrong. Just as she was about to dismiss it as a prank, a loud banging erupted from her front door. Her stomach dropped, and she hesitated before moving toward it. "Who is it?" she called out, trying to keep her voice steady. "Delivery." Came the reply, but the voice sounded different, more urgent. Jennifer's heart raced as she glanced through the peephole, but all she could see was darkness. Taking a deep breath, she opened the door cautiously. Standing there was a different man, drenched from the rain, his face obscured by a hood. "Did you order food?" he asked, his voice shaking. "No, I just got a delivery," she said, her mind racing. "From who?" he demanded, stepping closer. There was an edge to his voice that sent chills down her spine. "I don't know, just a pizza place," she replied, the note from the first driver flashing in her mind. The man's eyes narrowed, his body tense as he surveyed the area. "Listen, you need to get out of here, now." "What? Why?" Jennifer's confusion morphed into fear. "They're coming for you," he said, glancing over his shoulder, as if he expected someone to appear at any moment. "You don't understand. That guy, he's dangerous. He's not just a delivery driver. He's involved with something much darker." The reality of the situation hit her like a freight train. "What do you mean?" she whispered, backing away from the door. "Just trust me. You have to leave. Right now." Before she could respond, the lights flickered, and the power in her apartment went out, plunging her into darkness. A loud crash echoed outside, followed by frantic footsteps. Jennifer's heart pounded as she grabbed her phone, desperately trying to turn on the flashlight. In the dim light, she saw the man at the door still standing there, panic etched on his face. "Come on, we don't have much time." Without thinking, she rushed past him and grabbed her keys. "Where do we go?" "Just follow me," he urged, and they hurried out into the rain, the sound of pounding footsteps behind them. They sprinted down the street, the rain drenching them, but the adrenaline kept Jennifer moving. "What's going on?" she gasped, glancing back. "They're after you because of that delivery," he explained, breathing heavily. "You don't even know what you've gotten involved with, do you?" As they reached the end of the street, he pulled her into a nearby alley. "Stay quiet," he whispered, pressing her against the cold, damp wall. Jennifer's mind raced as she tried to piece together what he was saying. "What do you mean, the pizza you ordered?" "It's not just pizza. They use it to lure people in, and once they get you, he trailed off, looking around nervously. Suddenly, a shadowy figure appeared at the end of the alley. It was the delivery driver, his face twisted into a sinister grin. "You shouldn't have run, Jennifer," he called out, his voice echoing in the dark. Her blood ran cold as she realized he wasn't just a delivery driver. He was something much more terrifying. "Run!" The man beside her shouted, and they took off down the alley, the sound of footsteps chasing them echoing in the night. They darted through the rain-soaked streets, fear propelling them forward. Jennifer glanced back, catching sight of the driver still pursuing them, his expression manic and determined. "Why is he after me?" she shouted, her heart racing. "He thinks you know too much," the man replied. "But you don't. Just keep moving." As they turned a corner, they spotted a diner still open, the neon lights flickering invitingly. "In there, we can hide." They rushed inside, breathless and soaked. The waitress looked up in surprise as they entered, eyes widening at the sight of their fear. "Get behind the counter," the man ordered, and they ducked down, peering over the edge as the door swung open. The driver stepped in, scanning the diner with a predatory gaze. "I know you're in here," he called out, his voice dripping with malice. "You can't hide forever." Jennifer's heart raced as she held her breath, the weight of the situation pressing down on her. The man beside her gripped her arm tightly, his eyes locked on the delivery driver. "Stay quiet," he whispered, and she nodded, trying to stay as still as possible. The driver stepped further inside, searching each booth. Jennifer felt a surge of fear as he approached the counter. Just then, the waitress took a bold step forward. "Can I help you?" she asked, her voice steady despite the tension in the air. The driver turned, his eyes narrowing at her. "I'm just looking for someone who doesn't want to be found. Maybe you should leave," she said, her tone firm. He smirked, but before he could respond, the sound of sirens blared outside. The driver's expression shifted, and for a moment, he hesitated. "Don't think you can run from me," he shouted before bolting out of the diner, the door slamming behind him. Jennifer felt her breath return, and she and the man stood slowly, confusion swirling in their minds. "What just happened?" she asked, glancing at the waitress. "Are you two okay?" the waitress asked, concern etched on her face. "Do you want me to call the police?" "Yes, please," the man replied, still shaken. "But you need to tell them that there's a delivery driver out there who's not what he seems." As the waitress rushed to the phone, Jennifer turned to the man beside her. "Who are you? Why were you out there?" "My name is Mark," he said, running a hand through his wet hair. "I've been tracking this delivery service for months. They lure people in, And those who don't escape, they disappear. Jennifer felt a wave of dread wash over her. But why me? I didn't do anything. You ordered food, didn't you? That's all it takes, Mark replied, his expression grim. They pick targets randomly, and once you're in their sights, it's a game of survival. Before she could respond, the door swung open again, and the waitress stepped back, pale and shaken. He's back, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Mark grabbed Jennifer's hand, pulling her deeper into the diner as the driver entered. His demeanor changed. You can't hide from me, Jennifer, he shouted, his eyes wild. She felt a surge of fear as he stepped toward them, the air thick with tension. Just then, the sound of police sirens echoed outside, and the driver paused, glancing back toward the door. This isn't over, he hissed, backing away slowly. You. The sun had set, and with it came the typical Friday night bustle in Laura's small apartment. After a long week at work, she was looking forward to unwinding with a good movie and some takeout. A quick scroll through her favorite food delivery app brought up a new restaurant that had just opened in her neighborhood. Intrigued by the glowing reviews and mouth-watering images, she quickly placed her order and settled in for what she expected would be a relaxing evening. 30 minutes later, Laura heard the familiar ping of her phone. Order is on its way, she smiled, eagerly awaiting her food. The rain began to fall lightly outside, adding to the cozy atmosphere of her living room. She dimmed the lights, put on a movie, and wrapped herself in a soft blanket. After an hour, her excitement turned into concern. Where is my food? She muttered to herself, glancing at her phone again. She saw that her order had been delivered, but she never heard a knock at the door. Frowning, she checked the delivery app for details. It said, delivered, 8:30 p.m. Confused, she checked her front door but found nothing. Did I miss it? She wondered aloud. There were no missed calls or messages. Frustrated, she decided to call the restaurant. Hello, I just checked my order, and it says it's been delivered, but I haven't received anything, she explained when the manager answered. Let me check that for you, the manager replied. After a few moments of silence, he spoke again, his tone serious. Can you confirm your address? Sure, it's 123 Maple Street. Actually, it looks like the driver delivered it to 321 Maple Street. That's not my address, Laura exclaimed, her annoyance rising. Can you send someone back? I'm really sorry about that. Let me see what I can do, the manager said, sounding genuinely apologetic. After a brief hold, he returned. We're sending out a driver to get your order back and deliver it to you. Should be about 20 minutes. Okay, thank you, she said, feeling slightly better. Just as she hung up, her phone buzzed again. A new message popped up from the delivery app. Delivery driver, I'm on my way. Should be there in 10 minutes. Laura settled back down, grabbing her blanket and preparing to enjoy her movie. But as the clock ticked, unease crept in. It was raining harder now, and she couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. Why had the driver delivered her food to the wrong address? The sound of the doorbell jolted her out of her thoughts. She glanced at the clock. It was 9:15 p.m., only 5 minutes later than expected. Still, a strange apprehension filled her as she approached the door. Hello, she called out, her voice slightly shaky. There was no response, just the sound of rain pelting the ground outside. Laura took a deep breath and opened the door a crack, peering out into the dimly lit hallway. To her surprise, a delivery driver stood there, drenched from the rain, his head down. "Your food," he muttered, lifting a soggy bag toward her. "Finally," Laura exclaimed, relief flooding through her. "Thank you," but as she reached for the bag, she noticed something unsettling about the driver. He wore a cap pulled low over his face, casting shadows that obscured his features. "Is everything okay?" she asked, trying to read his expression. "Just hungry for some pizza," he replied, his voice low and strained. Okay," she said, taking the bag. It felt heavier than she expected. "Thank you. Have a good night." The driver didn't respond. Instead, he stood there, staring at her with an intensity that made her uncomfortable. She quickly shut the door, her heart racing. Once inside, she placed the bag on the table and opened it, revealing the pizza and some breadsticks, the aroma filling the room. She was about to dig in when she noticed a small slip of paper nestled among the food. Curious, she pulled it out and unfolded it. The note was simple, with jagged handwriting. "You should have never ordered from here." Chills ran down her spine as she read the words again, dread settling in her stomach. What did it mean? She glanced at the door, suddenly feeling exposed and vulnerable in her apartment. Deciding it was just a prank, she pushed the note aside and turned on the TV. But her appetite had vanished, replaced by an unsettling tension in the air. The rain continued to pour, the wind howling outside, and she couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching her. Time passed slowly as Laura forced herself to focus on the movie, but every sound made her jump. A loud crash of thunder echoed outside, causing her to gasp and turn her head towards the window. Suddenly, the lights flickered and went out, plunging her into darkness. Panic rose within her. "Not now," she whispered, feeling her heart race. She grabbed her phone, using its flashlight to illuminate the room. Just then, she heard it, a soft knocking sound at the door. It was tentative, almost hesitant. Her heart sank. Who could it be? It was late, and she was certain it was the same driver. Summoning her courage, she approached the door and peered through the peephole. To her surprise, it was the delivery driver again, his expression unreadable. The rain still poured heavily outside, but he seemed completely unfazed by it, standing there in the dark. "Hello," she called out, her voice shaking. "What do you want?" "Open the door," he replied, his voice low and cold. "I need to talk to you." "About what?" she said, backing away from the door. "About your order," he said, his tone growing more aggressive. "Open the door, Laura." She took a step back, her heart racing. "How do you know my name?" He chuckled darkly, sending chills down her spine. "You don't remember me, do you? I was just at your apartment. Leave me alone," she shouted, turning to bolt for her phone, but before she could reach it, the lights flickered back on. "Why won't you open the door?" he asked, his voice rising with anger. Laura's breath quickened as she reached for her phone, ready to call the police. "Get away from my door," she yelled, pressing the button to dial. Suddenly, the knocking grew more insistent, the sound echoing in her small apartment. "You're making a mistake. Laura, open up. Help. Somebody help me." She screamed, her heart pounding in her chest. Just then, the door began to rattle as he slammed his shoulder against it, the force sending vibrations through the entire apartment. Laura gasped and backed away, her fingers trembling as she dialed 911. 911. "What's your emergency?" The operator answered. "There's someone at my door." He's trying to break in. Stay calm, ma'am. Is he armed? I don't know, Laura cried, feeling helpless. Lock all your doors and windows. Help is on the way, the operator assured her. Just then, there was a loud bang as the driver slammed into the door again. Open the door, Laura. You can't hide from me. The operator's voice cut through the chaos. Stay on the line with me. Help is on the way. Please hurry. Laura pleaded, backing away further. The driver's voice grew louder, now filled with rage. You shouldn't have ordered the pizza. You have something that belongs to me. What? I didn't do anything, she screamed, tears streaming down her face. With every bang against the door, Laura's fear escalated. She glanced around her apartment, searching for a way to escape. The back door. It led to the fire escape. Are you still there? The operator asked. Yes. I'm going out the back, she replied, rushing toward the door that led to the fire escape. Do not open the front door. The operator warned. I won't. I promise. Laura shouted, her heart racing. She quickly opened the back door and slipped out onto the fire escape, the cold metal sending chills through her body. Rain poured down, drenching her as she hurried down the stairs, desperate to get away from the apartment. But as she reached the bottom, she saw a figure standing in the alley, illuminated by a flickering streetlight. It was the driver, his eyes wide and crazed as he stared at her. Where do you think you're going? He shouted, his voice echoing in the empty alley. Panic surged through her, and she turned to run, sprinting down the street as fast as she could. The rain blurred her vision, but adrenaline kept her moving, her heart pounding in her chest. As she ran, she could hear his footsteps behind her, getting closer. You can't escape, he called, laughter tinged with madness. Laura's lungs burned, but she pushed herself to keep running. She needed to find safety. As she turned a corner, she spotted a small convenience store still open. She rushed inside, bursting through the doors and gasping for breath. The clerk looked up, surprise etched on his face. Are you okay? There's a man outside. He's trying to get me, Laura gasped, her voice shaking. The clerk's expression changed to one of concern as he grabbed the phone behind the counter. Call the police. She turned to look out the window, breath hitching as she saw the driver standing outside, watching her with a sinister grin on his face. He didn't even flinch as the rain soaked him to the bone. Minutes felt like hours as Laura waited for the police to arrive, her heart racing in fear. Finally, she heard sirens in the distance, growing louder as they approached. Stay close, the clerk instructed, his eyes darting toward the door. When the police arrived, they quickly apprehended the driver, dragging him away as he yelled incoherently. You'll regret this. She belongs to me. Laura stood frozen in place, trembling as she watched them put him into the back of a squad car. One of the officers approached her. Are you all right, ma'am? She nodded, but the terror still clung to her. I didn't know him. I just ordered food. Don't worry, you're safe now, he assured her. As they took her statement, Laura felt a wave of relief wash over her. But deep down, she knew this wasn't over. The driver had known her name, and she couldn't shake the feeling that he had been watching her for longer than she realized. After what felt like an eternity, the officers left, assuring her they would keep an eye on her neighborhood. She thanked the clerk and stepped outside into the rain, feeling exhausted but grateful to be free. As she made her way back home, she couldn't help but glance over her shoulder, half expecting the driver to reappear. But the street was empty, the only sound the rain pouring down around her. Once inside, She locked all the doors and windows, ensuring she was safe. She curled up on her couch, wrapping herself in a blanket, still shaken by the night's events. The words on the note replayed in her mind. "You should have never ordered from here." As she tried to calm her racing heart, she vowed to never order food online again. The thought of someone out there, lurking in the shadows, sent a shiver down her spine. Laura took a deep breath, trying to shake off the feeling of dread. But as she looked around her dimly lit apartment, she couldn't help but feel that her world had shifted forever. From that day on, she made a point to avoid the delivery app, choosing to cook her meals instead. But the memory of that night haunted her, a constant reminder that sometimes even the simplest things could lead to terrifying consequences. Days turned into weeks, and life returned to a semblance of normalcy. But every time the doorbell rang, her heart raced, and she held her breath, fearing that the nightmare would return. It wasn't until a month later, late one night while she was winding down from work, that the fear resurfaced. She received a notification from the food delivery app. "Special offer, 50% off your next order." Her hands trembled as she stared at the screen, memories flooding back. She thought of the driver and the chilling note, the way he had seemed to know her. Taking a deep breath, she turned off her phone, determined to ignore the temptation. "No more delivery," she whispered to herself, pushing the app out of her mind. But that night, as she drifted off to sleep, the shadows in her apartment seemed darker, more foreboding. She couldn't shake the feeling that someone was still watching, waiting for the perfect moment to strike again. And so, with each passing day, she became more vigilant, more paranoid. The comfort of her home had turned into a prison, the walls closing in as she wondered if she would ever truly be free from the terror that lurked just outside her door. It was a stormy night in October, and Emily was huddled under her blanket, scrolling through her phone while watching her favorite true crime series. She had just moved to the small town of Maplewood, a place where everyone seemed to know each other and where the streets were lined with old trees, their branches swaying ominously in the wind. Despite the warm glow of her living room, a chill crept through the house, reminding her that she was still a stranger in this new place. As the rain beat against her window, she felt the hunger pangs kicking in. Emily decided to order a late-night snack, flipping through the food delivery app on her phone. She scrolled past the usual options until a new restaurant caught her eye. Tony's Pizza, open late. The name seemed inviting, and the photos of their pizzas looked delicious. Why not, she thought. A little late-night pizza never hurt anyone. After placing her order, Emily returned to her show, the sound of thunder rumbling in the distance. A few minutes later, her phone chimed, signaling that the delivery driver was on his way. She felt a sense of anticipation, her stomach growling at the thought of hot, cheesy pizza. As the minutes ticked by, the storm outside intensified. Lightning illuminated her living room, casting eerie shadows across the walls. Emily glanced at her phone again. It was already past 11 p.m., and the delivery was taking longer than expected. Just as she was about to check the app, her phone buzzed with a message. "Your driver is nearby." She felt a surge of excitement. "Finally," she muttered, settling back into her blanket. But then her phone buzzed again. "Your order has been delivered." Confused, Emily got up and walked to her front door. She opened it to find nothing but darkness and the sound of rain pouring down. "Hello," she called out, stepping onto the porch. "Is anyone there?" No response came. She checked her phone once more, hoping for a clue. There it was, a notification from the delivery app indicating the pizza had been left at her door. "This is strange," she thought, looking around. After searching her front porch, she turned to go back inside when she noticed something odd at the edge of her driveway. There was a small, dark object lying in the grass. "What is that?" she wondered, stepping closer. As she approached, her heart dropped. It was the pizza box, soaked from the rain. "Great," she groaned, picking it up. But as she opened the lid, her stomach twisted in horror. Instead of the expected gooey cheese and pepperoni, the pizza was covered in what looked like slimy, darkened vegetables, a horrifying sight. "What the hell?" she exclaimed, dropping the box as if it burned her. Something felt incredibly wrong. She picked up her phone to contact the restaurant, but then hesitated. An unsettling thought crossed her mind. What if they knew? Just then, she received another message from the delivery driver. "Sorry for the mix-up. I'll be back soon." Panic surged through her. "Back? What do you mean?" She typed back, her fingers trembling. "You ordered from the wrong place, didn't you?" came the response, sending chills down her spine. "What are you talking about?" she typed, but the driver didn't respond. Instead, Emily felt the hairs on the back of her neck stand on end as she heard a noise, a soft tapping, rhythmic and eerie, coming from the edge of her porch. Turning slowly, she felt her pulse quicken as she squinted into the darkness. "Hello," she called out again, trying to sound brave. "Is someone there?" The tapping continued, and she realized it was coming from a small wooden figure that sat on her porch, a weathered statue of a gnome. It seemed to sway slightly, though there was no wind. Emily's heart raced. She quickly shut the door, locking it tight. Taking deep breaths, she paced around her living room, desperately trying to shake off the unsettling feeling. Just then, her phone buzzed again. "Are you scared?" the driver messaged. Emily's stomach dropped. "Who are you?" She typed back, panic rising. "Just a friendly neighbor. I saw you ordered food." That didn't ease her anxiety. What kind of neighbor was this? She decided to ignore the message, but her heart raced as she stared out the window, feeling the rain, soaked night close in around her. Minutes passed, and the tapping resumed, louder this time. It echoed in her mind, relentless. It was coming from the window. She approached it cautiously, heart pounding, her breath itching in her throat. Looking through the glass, she saw a figure standing in her yard, shrouded in shadows. It was too dark to make out any features, but something about its posture felt menacing. "Who are you?" she shouted, her voice trembling. The figure didn't respond. It just stood there, unmoving. Suddenly, her phone buzzed again. "I see you." Her heart raced as she stumbled back from the window, her mind racing with fear. "What do you want?" she typed in desperation. "To bring you a surprise," came the reply, followed by a series of eerie emojis, a knife, a gnome, and a pizza slice. That was it. She couldn't take it anymore. "I'm calling the police," she shouted, her fingers fumbling to dial 911. 911. "What's your emergency?" The operator answered calmly. "There's someone outside my house. I think they're trying to break in." Emily exclaimed, her voice quaking with fear. "Can you see them?" the operator asked. "Yes, they're just standing there. I think they know I'm inside. Stay calm. Help is on the way." "Do you have any weapons?" "Just a kitchen knife," Emily replied, grabbing it from the drawer. Stay away from the windows and keep your doors locked, the operator instructed. Emily moved to the living room, clutching the knife tightly, her heart pounding. She could hear the rain pounding against the windows, the wind howling outside. Just then, the lights flickered and went out, plunging her into darkness. Stay on the line with me, the operator urged, but Emily could barely focus, the fear overwhelming her. The tapping resumed, louder and more frantic, and Emily felt a wave of terror crash over her. "I can't see anything," she whispered, the knife shaking in her hand. "Help is almost there," the operator reassured her. Emily could hear the figure moving now, a soft shuffling sound approaching her front door. "They're coming," she gasped, her heart racing. "Stay quiet and stay hidden," the operator said. She dropped to the floor, trying to make herself as small as possible, the knife gripped tightly in her hand. The figure was right outside her door now, knocking gently, almost mockingly. "Emily, open the door," a voice called, chilling her to the bone. "Who are you?" she shouted back, her voice breaking. "It's your pizza. Open up," the voice laughed, and Emily felt a wave of dread wash over her. "No, get away from me," she yelled, backing away from the door. Just then, she heard sirens in the distance, a bright beacon of hope cutting through her fear. The figure paused, then started to laugh, a low, chilling sound that made her blood run cold. "Too late for help, Emily," the laughter echoed in the darkness, sending shivers down her spine. Just then, the lights flickered back on, illuminating the room. The figure stood outside her window, their face hidden in the shadows, but she could see a sinister grin spreading across their face. Then, with a sudden movement, they turned and fled into the darkness, disappearing from view just as the police arrived. Emily scrambled to her feet, running to the door as the officers knocked. "Open up, it's the police." She flung the door open, relief flooding through her as she saw the officers standing there, flashlights shining into the darkness. "Where did they go?" she gasped. "Who?" one of the officers asked, scanning the area. "The person outside. They were just here." "Did you see their face?" another officer asked, stepping inside her home. "No, they were hiding. They were taunting me." The officers exchanged glances, their expressions serious. "All right, we'll need you to stay calm. Let's check the area," one of them said, gesturing for Emily to sit down. As they searched the yard, Emily could feel her heart racing, anxiety bubbling beneath the surface. What if they came back? What if they knew where she lived? After a few minutes, the officers returned, shaking their heads. "No sign of anyone, but we'll keep an eye on the neighborhood. Just stay vigilant, and if you see anything else, call us immediately," one officer advised. "Thank you," Emily said, trying to steady her voice. "Do you have a friend or family member you can stay with tonight?" the other officer asked, concern etched on his face. I think I'll be okay," she replied, though deep down, fear gnawed at her. As they left, she locked the door behind them, still clutching the kitchen knife. She tried to settle down, forcing herself to breathe, but the adrenaline was still pumping through her veins. Hours passed, and sleep evaded her. Every creak of the house made her jump. Every shadow felt threatening. Finally, just as dawn broke, she heard another knock at the door. Heart racing, she glanced at the clock. It was barely 6 a.m. Who could that be, she thought, glancing out the window. Standing at her door was the delivery driver, his face still obscured by the shadows. "I have your pizza," he called out, a grin spreading across his face. Emily's heart dropped. I didn't order anything. The driver's grin widened, revealing teeth that looked almost too sharp. But I brought you a special delivery. No, get away. Emily shouted, retreating into the house. The driver's laughter echoed in the morning light as she stumbled backward, panic rising once more. Just a little gift from your friendly neighbor, he called, still laughing. Emily rushed to the kitchen, dialing 911 again. There's someone at my door. Please help me. Stay calm. We're sending officers right away, the operator replied. She turned back to the door, trembling. Leave me alone, she shouted, but the driver only laughed louder, and the sound echoed in her mind. Minutes felt like hours as she waited, heart racing, every nerve ending on high alert. She could hear the driver banging on her door, the laughter haunting her as it filled the air. Finally, she heard sirens blaring, and the driver's laughter faded into the background as the officers arrived. They burst through her door, weapons drawn, and the driver was gone, slipping into the shadows as they stepped inside. Are you okay? One officer asked, concern evident on his face. I don't know who he is, he just keeps coming back. Emily exclaimed, shaking uncontrollably. The officers assured her they would patrol the area and keep an eye out, but deep down, she felt the terror seep back in. Days turned into weeks, and despite the police patrols, Emily's fear never fully left. She received strange messages from the delivery driver, taunting her, each more chilling than the last. I see you, Emily, he would write. You can't hide forever. The unease settled into her bones, an ever-present reminder of that stormy night. She stopped going out after dark, avoiding her front porch and the shadows that lurked just outside her window. Finally, she made the decision to leave Maplewood, to escape the haunting memories of that terrifying night. As she packed her belongings, she hoped to leave behind the gnome statue, the driver, and the darkness that had seeped into her life. But as she closed the door behind her, she heard a familiar sound, soft tapping at her window. No, she whispered, terror rising within her. And with that sound, she knew she would never truly escape. In the quaint town of Briarwood, where the streets were lined with neatly trimmed hedges and white picket fences, Jenna lived a quiet life. She had just moved into her cozy two-bedroom apartment, excited about starting a new chapter. It was late evening, and after a long day of unpacking and organizing, Jenna realized she hadn't eaten since breakfast. With the temptation of fast food calling her name, she decided to order delivery from a new restaurant in town, the Hungry Bear. The restaurant had rave reviews online, promising fresh ingredients and fast service. Jenna browsed through the menu, her mouth watering at the thought of hot wings and a double cheeseburger. She placed her order, feeling satisfied that dinner was taken care of. As she settled into her couch to watch a documentary, she could barely contain her excitement. Perfect night for some comfort food, she thought, looking at the time on her phone. It was 8 p.m., and the estimated delivery time was about 30 minutes. As the minutes passed, the sky outside darkened, and Jenna's anticipation grew. The rain began to fall, tapping rhythmically against her window, a cozy soundtrack to her evening. After about 45 minutes, her phone buzzed with a notification. Your driver is on the way. She grabbed her wallet and prepared to pay when the doorbell rang. Jenna's heart raced. That was quick, she murmured, moving to the door. Peering through the peephole, she saw a man standing on her doorstep, holding a large insulated bag. He was tall, with an unkempt beard and a baseball cap pulled low over his eyes. For a moment, Jenna hesitated. Something about him felt off, but she brushed it aside, telling herself it was just her imagination. Coming. She called, unlocking the door and pulling it open. Evening. I've got your food, he said, his voice gravelly as he smiled at her, revealing yellow teeth. Thanks, Jenna replied, stepping aside to let him in. She handed him cash, and as he reached for the bag, she couldn't shake the feeling that he was staring at her a bit too intently. Nice place you got here, he said, glancing around her living room. Thanks, just moved in, Jenna said, forcing a smile. I hope the food is as good as the reviews say. Don't worry, it's all fresh, he assured her, his grin widening. She took the bag from him and began to check the contents, making sure everything was there. Oh, perfect, thank you so much. As she was about to close the door, the delivery man paused. You know, this is a pretty quiet neighborhood, he said, his tone shifting slightly. Yeah, it's nice, Jenna replied, feeling a prickle of unease. Just remember to lock your doors at night, he added, a glint in his eye. Okay, thanks for the advice, Jenna said, her smile faltering. She quickly shut the door, locking it behind her. Once inside, she took a deep breath, trying to shake off the unsettling encounter. She set the food on the coffee table and eagerly opened the boxes, the delicious aroma filling her apartment. As she took her first bite of the cheesy burger, she felt her tension ease. This was exactly what she needed after a long day. She continued eating, lost in her show, until she heard a faint sound, a scratching noise coming from the door. Her heart dropped. What was that? She whispered, pausing the show and straining to listen. The scratching persisted, followed by a soft thud against the door. Jenna stood up, trying to gather her courage. Hello, she called out, her voice trembling. Silence followed. She glanced through the peephole, but the porch was empty. It's just the wind, she reassured herself, returning to her meal. But as she resumed eating, the scratching returned, more persistent this time. Jenna's heart raced, and she felt a wave of dread wash over her. Okay, this is getting weird, she muttered, rising once more to check. Again, there was no one at the door. She decided to ignore it, convincing herself it was just her imagination. But as the night wore on, the scratching persisted, growing louder, more frantic. Finally, she couldn't take it anymore. I'm calling the police, she decided, her hands shaking as she picked up her phone. But just then, the scratching stopped, replaced by a soft thud. Jenna froze, her heart pounding in her chest. She glanced at the clock. It was nearly midnight. The noise continued, a rhythmic sound that seemed to come from her window now. Feeling brave, she approached the window and pulled back the curtain, her breath catching in her throat. Outside, the delivery man stood in the rain, his eyes wide and fixed on her. What do you want? She shouted, her voice shaking. Just wanted to check on you. He called back, his smile unsettling in the darkness. Leave me alone. She yelled, her heart racing. He didn't move. Instead, he reached into his bag and pulled out something shiny, holding it up for her to see. It was a knife. Panic surged through her as she stumbled back from the window, her mind racing. What the hell is wrong with him? She dashed to her bedroom, locking the door behind her. Her heart raced as she fumbled for her phone, trying to remember if she had the police's number saved. Just as she dialed, she heard a loud crash from the living room, Jenna's blood ran cold. He's in the house, she thought, the panic gripping her. 911, what's your emergency? The operator's calm voice came through. There's someone in my apartment. He's trying to get in. Jenna gasped, her voice barely above a whisper. Stay calm. Can you get to a safe place? The operator asked. I'm in my bedroom, locked in, she replied, holding her breath. Good. Help is on the way. Can you hear him? Jenna listened closely, her heart pounding. The crashing sound was followed by silence. He's not making any noise, she whispered. Keep the line open. We'll send someone immediately, the operator said. As Jenna sat in her bedroom, every creak of the floorboards felt amplified, echoing in her ears. Please hurry, she whispered, fear enveloping her. Suddenly, she heard footsteps, slow, deliberate. They moved toward her bedroom door, making her heart race. Is he coming for me? She thought, gripping her phone tightly. Just a few more minutes, Jenna. Stay quiet, the operator instructed. The footsteps stopped outside her door, and Jenna felt her breath hitch. What's he doing? She heard a soft knock, and her heart dropped. Jenna, it's me. Let me in, the delivery man called out, his voice overly cheerful, almost mocking. Go away, she shouted back, her voice breaking. Come on, I just want to talk. I brought you something special. No, she yelled, tears streaming down her face. The footsteps moved away from the door, and Jenna held her breath. Please, please go away, she thought, hoping the police would arrive soon. But instead of leaving, she heard the sound of something scraping against the wall. He's trying to get in, Jenna gasped, panic overwhelming her. Stay quiet, Jenna. Help is almost there, the operator reminded her. Suddenly, she heard the sound of glass shattering, followed by the delivery man's laughter. This will be fun, he called out, and Jenna's heart raced in terror. In a fit of adrenaline, she sprang into action, looking for something to defend herself with. She spotted a lamp on her nightstand and grabbed it, ready to use it if necessary. The sound of footsteps returned, growing closer as the delivery man made his way into her bedroom. Jenna's breath caught in her throat as she tightened her grip on the lamp, waiting for the moment to strike. The door creaked open, revealing the delivery man's twisted grin. Surprise, he shouted, holding the knife in front of him. Get away from me, Jenna screamed, swinging the lamp at him with all her strength. The lamp connected with his shoulder, causing him to stumble back, but he quickly regained his footing. You'll regret that, he snarled, lunging forward. Jenna's heart raced as she backed away, trying to put distance between them. Please, don't hurt me, she cried out, desperation creeping into her voice. Just then, she heard sirens approaching, a glimmer of hope shining through her fear. Help is on the way, she shouted, her voice rising. The delivery man paused, glancing toward the window as the sirens drew closer. No one's coming for you, Jenna, he growled, advancing toward her. With adrenaline surging through her, Jenna swung the lamp again, hitting him squarely in the face. He stumbled back, momentarily dazed, and Jenna seized her chance. She bolted toward the window, desperately trying to open it, as she heard the police sirens blaring closer. Help, help me, she screamed, looking back at him as he regained his composure. Don't think you can escape that easily, he shouted, lunging toward her. Just as she managed to wrench the window open, the door burst open, and police officers rushed in. Get down, one officer shouted, aiming his weapon at the delivery man. The delivery man froze, his expression shifting from anger to shock as the officers surrounded him. "You're under arrest," one of them yelled, moving to apprehend him. Jenna collapsed to the floor, shaking uncontrollably as the officers secured the delivery man. "Are you okay?" one officer asked, rushing to her side. I'm fine. I just wanted food," she stammered, tears streaming down her cheeks. "We've got him." "You're safe now," the officer reassured her, helping her to her feet. As they led the delivery man away, Jenna felt the weight of her terror lift. She couldn't believe what had just happened. The officer stayed with her while another checked the apartment for any remaining threats. "You did great. Just hang in there," he said, giving her a reassuring smile. As the reality of the situation sank in, Jenna felt grateful for the officer's quick response. She could have easily become another victim, but now she was safe. Later, as she sat in her living room, shaken but relieved, she couldn't help but think about how something as simple as ordering food had turned into a nightmare. She vowed to be more careful, to always trust her instincts, no matter how small the warning signs seemed. In the days that followed, Jenna received support from the community. People brought her meals, offering comfort and companionship as she healed from the trauma. Though the experience left her shaken, she was determined to reclaim her life. Weeks later, Jenna discovered a passion for cooking, finding solace in the kitchen as she prepared her meals from scratch. She even started a small food blog, sharing recipes and stories with others. In a way, the experience had changed her life for the better. It taught her the importance of safety and vigilance, but it also sparked a new beginning, reminding her that she was stronger than she ever thought possible. However, deep in the recesses of her mind, she still held onto the memories of that night. The laughter, the threats, and the terror were seared into her memory, a reminder of how quickly life could turn upside down. As she stood at her kitchen counter, chopping vegetables for her latest recipe, she felt a twinge of anxiety whenever the doorbell rang. Even the sound of a car pulling up outside sent her heart racing. One evening, as she prepared dinner, she heard the familiar sound of the doorbell. Her heart raced, and she froze for a moment, her breath itching in her throat. "It's just someone delivering a package," she reassured herself, but fear still gripped her. Cautiously, she approached the door and peered through the peephole. Relief washed over her as she saw a delivery driver standing there, holding a package. Taking a deep breath, she opened the door, forcing a smile. "Hi, I'm sorry. I was just—" The driver smiled back, but something about the way he looked at her made her heart race. "You ordered something?" he asked, his eyes flickering with something she couldn't quite place. "Ah, yeah, just a package," she replied, her voice shaking slightly. As she reached for the package, the driver's smile widened, glad to deliver. "Just remember to lock your doors," he said, his tone oddly familiar. Jenna's stomach dropped as she realized the driver looked eerily similar to the man from that night. "Thank you," she replied, trying to mask her fear. As she closed the door, she felt her heart racing again. "It can't be him," she thought, shaking her head. That was just a nightmare. But as she set the package down on the table, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was still watching her, lurking just out of sight. The fear gnawed at her, a constant reminder that even in a safe place, danger could still lurk just around the corner. Life in the small town of Maplewood was usually quiet, a picturesque setting where everyone knew each other's names. Sarah, A busy single mother of two, often struggled to balance work and parenting. One chilly autumn evening, after a long day at her job as a nurse, she felt completely drained. The thought of cooking dinner was overwhelming, so she decided to order takeout from Tony's Pizza, her kid's favorite place. She glanced at the clock. It was already 6:30 p.m., and the kids would be home from soccer practice soon. Sarah quickly grabbed her phone and placed the order, opting for a large pepperoni pizza and some garlic knots, hoping to keep the evening as stress-free as possible. "Dinner is on the way," she told her kids as they burst through the door, their cheeks flushed from the cold and excitement from practice. "Yay, pizza!" her youngest son, Jamie, exclaimed, jumping up and down. After about 30 minutes, Sarah heard the familiar sound of her phone buzzing with a notification. "Your order has been delivered." She felt a wave of relief wash over her, grateful that she could check dinner off her list. She opened the door, expecting to see the delivery driver, but instead found the pizza box sitting on her porch. How odd, she thought, glancing around. Usually, the driver would hand her the food. Shrugging it off, she picked up the box and brought it inside. As she set the pizza down on the table, she noticed it was unusually heavy. Curious, she opened the lid, but instead of the hot, cheesy pizza she was expecting, a chill ran down her spine as she stared at a large, bloody piece of meat resting in the center. Confusion flooded her mind. "What the heck is this?" she mumbled, her stomach twisting with unease. It was clearly not the pizza she ordered. The doorbell rang again, jolting her from her thoughts. She hurried to answer it, her heart racing. When she opened the door, she found a man standing there, his clothes drenched from the rain and his expression anxious. Ma'am, I'm really sorry. That wasn't meant for you," he exclaimed, glancing nervously over his shoulder. "Then whose is it?" Sarah demanded, still holding the pizza box open. "I don't know. I just deliver what I'm given," he said, his eyes darting around as if he was afraid someone might be watching. "What do you mean it's not meant for me?" she pressed, trying to keep her composure. "Look, I need to get out of here. I'm just the delivery guy." "But you should probably call the police," he said, his voice trembling. Before Sarah could respond, he turned and ran down the porch, disappearing into the darkness. Confused and frightened, she stepped back inside and closed the door. "Mom, what's wrong?" her daughter, Lily, asked, noticing the fear in her mother's eyes. I'm not sure," Sarah replied, her heart racing. "Just stay here for a minute." Feeling an overwhelming sense of dread, she picked up her phone and dialed the local police department, her hands shaking. 911, what's your emergency? "I think I received a strange delivery. There's something, it doesn't look right." "It's not food," she stammered, her voice trembling. "Can you describe what you see?" The operator asked calmly. "It's a bloody piece of meat. I ordered a pizza, but I don't know where it came from." "Stay on the line, ma'am. We're sending officers to your location," the operator said. Sarah hung up, trying to calm her racing heart. As she stood there, the unsettling feeling of being watched crept over her. She locked the door and moved to the kitchen window, peering outside. The street was dark, illuminated only by a flickering streetlight. Minutes passed, and she felt like an eternity had gone by when suddenly, her phone rang again. It was an unknown number. "Hello." She answered, a knot forming in her stomach. "Did you enjoy my gift?" A voice on the other end said, low and menacing. Her heart dropped. "Who is this?" she demanded, trying to keep her voice steady. "Just a friend wanting to make sure you're happy." "I thought the meat would be a nice touch," the voice taunted. "Get away from me," Sarah shouted, her voice breaking. "Oh, but I'm already closer than you think. Look out your window," the voice said, a sinister laugh echoing in her ear. Panicking, Sarah rushed back to the window, her heart pounding against her chest. As she peered outside, she was horrified to see a dark figure standing at the edge of her yard, watching her. "Who are you?" she screamed, but the figure just stood there, unmoving. She quickly backed away, her breath coming in short gasps. She turned to grab her kids, only to find Lily clutching Jamie tightly, fear etched on their faces. "Mom, what's going on?" "There's someone outside," Sarah whispered, trying to remain calm. Just then, the power went out, plunging the house into darkness. Sarah's heart raced as she fumbled for her phone, the screen illuminating her panicked expression. "Stay close to me," she instructed, leading her kids into the living room. "We need to hide." They huddled together behind the couch, Sarah's mind racing as she listened for any signs of the intruder. Outside, the rain pelted against the windows, creating a cacophony that seemed to echo the turmoil in her heart. Suddenly, she heard a loud bang from the back of the house, followed by the sound of breaking glass. "No," she thought, fear gripping her as she realized the intruder was trying to get in. "Mom, I'm scared," Jamie whispered, his voice trembling. "I know, baby. Just stay quiet," Sarah replied, her own heart pounding. They waited in silence, each second feeling like an eternity. Sarah held her breath, praying that the police would arrive soon. She could hear footsteps moving through her home, the sound echoing eerily in the darkness. After what felt like an eternity, her phone buzzed again, the light casting shadows around the room. Sarah quickly checked it. It was a message from the police. "We are 5 minutes away. Stay inside and keep doors locked." Relief washed over her, but she still felt the icy grip of fear. The footsteps grew closer, now coming from the hallway. "Mom," Lily whispered again, her voice shaking. "Shh," Sarah hissed, clutching her daughter's arm. The footsteps stopped outside the living room, and she could see a shadow moving against the wall. Her heart raced as she silently picked up a lamp, ready to defend her children. "Hello, Sarah," the voice from earlier echoed, chilling her to the bone. "Leave us alone," she screamed, her voice filled with desperation. Suddenly, the shadow lunged forward, and in that instant, Sarah swung the lamp with all her might, connecting with the figure. The intruder stumbled back, momentarily disoriented. Sarah seized the moment to grab her kids and sprint toward the front door. "We have to go," she shouted, yanking it open just as the sound of sirens filled the air. As they burst outside, the police arrived, lights flashing. "Get back!" An officer shouted, moving toward the intruder, who was now attempting to regain his balance. "Hands up! Drop the weapon!" the officer yelled. The figure hesitated, and in that moment, Sarah and her children dashed toward the officers. They quickly led them away from the chaos, wrapping them in warm blankets as they caught their breath. The officers apprehended the intruder, who struggled but was no match for the police. Sarah watched, trembling, as they secured him in handcuffs. "Are you all okay?" one of the officers asked, checking on them. "We are fine, but I don't understand. Why?" Sarah said, her voice breaking as the adrenaline began to wear off. The officer sighed. "It looks like this man has been stalking women in the area. You were lucky we arrived when we did." As the officers took the intruder away, Sarah felt a mix of relief and lingering fear. Her heart was still racing, and she couldn't shake the memory of that chilling phone call. In the following days, Sarah struggled to process the events of that night. She couldn't return to her normal routine. Every sound seemed amplified. Every shadow felt threatening. The community rallied around her, offering support and comfort. To help herself heal, Sarah began attending a local self-defense class. She learned to reclaim her power, finding strength in the community around her. As she faced her fears head-on, she discovered a newfound resilience within herself. Weeks turned into months, and slowly, she began to feel safer in her home. The memories of that night still lingered, but with each passing day, they became less suffocating. One evening, as she sat at the dinner table with her kids, Sarah felt a sense of calm wash over her. They laughed and shared stories, the warmth of family filling the room. Then, her phone buzzed with a message. She hesitated for a moment, anxiety creeping back in. It was a notification from Tony's Pizza. Get 50% off your next order. Sarah's heart raced as she remembered the horrifying events associated with her last delivery. She quickly dismissed the message, deciding to cook dinner instead. As she prepared the meal, she felt a sense of triumph. She would not let fear dictate her life. The darkness that had once invaded her home was fading, and in its place was the light of hope and healing. The kids helped her set the table, their laughter echoing through the house, reminding her that they were safe. Though the shadows of fear still lingered, she knew she had the strength to confront them. Later, as she tucked her kids into bed, she kissed them goodnight, feeling grateful for the ordinary moments they shared. In the quiet of the night, Sarah took a moment for herself, reflecting on how far she had come. The road to recovery was long, but she was determined to face whatever challenges lay ahead. And so, she sat in her living room, surrounded by love and warmth, knowing that she was stronger than any fear that had ever threatened her home.